Hi everyone, I'm Jessie Rivers and today I'm going to show you how to make a wooden geometric wall hanging with my assistant and son Aiden. We have here everything that you'll need. The first thing you want to start out with is a base. This is a sheet of 1/4 inch plywood. You could use any plywood. This is a scrap that we had, so we're going to make it this big, but it could be much smaller or larger, it's up to you. We're going to use these thin poplar slats. You can find these at Home Depot or Lowe's. They come in a box that looks like this. They're 1/4 inch thick and they're 2 inches wide and 3 feet long. And they're under $1 a piece. You can buy the whole box or you can buy as many as you need. I like the poplar because it's a really light wood and it takes to stain and paint really well, and it's cheaper than oak. And then we're going to make a border around it, for which you could use 1x3, 1x2, or this nifty iron-on laminate that you just iron around your edges. I love this stuff. It's up to you. Then you'll also want paint and stain, any color that you like, or you can clear coat it, it's up to you, and wood glue. The tools that we'll be using are a miter saw. You're going to want to get a 45-degree angle, so this is the best tool for that. We're also going to use this portable circ saw. It's kind of optional, but it's going to help us cut our edges off real nice and clean. And we're going to give all of our wood a slight sanding later. You could use just a sanding brick from the hardware store, or you can get a sander, which I highly recommend, and some sheets of sandpaper. All right, let's get started. All right, we're going to start with getting our saw ready. This is a miter saw, and the key to this is that you can see all these numbers and you can change the angle of your cuts. Each saw is different. This is a pretty big blade, but you know, you can use, if you already have a chop saw of any kind, that will work. And if you want to go out and get yourself one, this is a DeWalt brand, which is really good, and I also would recommend Ridgid. I really like the Ridgid brand. Aiden's going to move our saw to the 45. You get the 45-degree mark perfectly in the center, and then lock it down. And every saw has some semblance of that action. So now we're ready to cut our wood. Now we're going to cut our first 45-degree angle into our poplar. We want to start with one end having a 45-degree angle on all of our slats of wood. So you can cut one at a time, or with this you can cut several at a time. It just depends on the size of your blade, but we've lined it up. You don't want your wood back here because then it's just going to cut a bit of your corner. You want to make sure you're cutting your whole corner off at a 45, and make sure your wood is pressed up against the back plate. All right, you can cut it. Now you repeat that like 56 times. I don't think I mentioned before, but you do want a measuring tape or a ruler or a straight edge. We need to find the center of our board, which if you've done something square or nicely evenly measured, that's easy. I used a scrap piece of wood, so I have 20 3/4, and I'm going to mark my center at 10 3/8, and then my width is 29 7/8, so I'm going to mark at 14 7/8. Nah, it's close enough. And now we're going to start constructing our pattern. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. You're just going to want to make sure that you're butting your pieces up together. You don't want anything coming apart too much. You want that seam to be really tight. And I start making my pattern before cutting off these ends. I will reuse this piece of wood to fill in elsewhere, but you basically get creative and start creating your design however you want it. Okay, now you can see we've started our pattern. The center point is the most important, so I always get 2 full pieces that go all the way down each side. Get them on the center mark, and then place something heavy. I'm in the scene shop right now, and we just happen to have this really heavy like vise that's like an anvil. So if you're doing it outside, you could use a big rock or a gallon of water. Just something that keeps this in place. And then I'm going to take all of our other long pieces and start fitting them in, but I'm going to go ahead and cut them at different measurements. I don't want just one piece. You could, but I want to chop them up so that this piece of wood may be different from this piece of wood. And the thing you want to remember is to keep your 45. Everything is going to be a 45-degree angle cut. And I also want the 45 on this side to be facing the same direction. I would not want to cut this angle down this way. I want it to be cut this way. And it can be any size. I really don't measure for these. I just pick a spot that I want to cut, and then I'll cut 4 of them so that each side is mirroring the other. And then when I come back with my paint, one piece might be white, one piece might be stained walnut. It just depends on the colors you're choosing, but that's what gives you the really interesting variation in your wood. And I think we might just put this into time lapse because it's going to take a little bit. All right, you can maybe see that I've separated our pieces. They're hanging off. I've left it in the pattern, but I want to be able to grab everything to paint. I have 2 colors. I mixed some white paint with water to do a whitewash, and it's about 2 parts paint to 1 part water. And then I mixed a little bit of dark walnut into a natural stain. I really like the special walnut stain, but I don't have any. So now I'm just gonna start pulling pieces and painting, and what I will do is make sure, just like with the cuts, that I'm mirroring each side. So I'll paint 4 pieces the same color and kind of place them back into their spot, and just mix it up. If you have 3 colors, you could have more variation. And I'm gonna forego the electric sander and just sand my cut edges as I go. Since this is gonna be a wall hanging and not like a tabletop surface, I don't think it's that big of a deal. All right. So I really hope that time lapse was as satisfying as I think it's gonna be. That was it though. Pull it all apart and then just go at it with your paint colors. I've done this technique on different things on 4 different projects, and it always turns out satisfying. I think this is a really cool, almost quilt block type of design. But now we're just gonna take a break and let everything dry really well. And then we'll pull it apart one more time and start gluing. And then we'll clean up our edges. This is a bit time consuming. I think altogether to get to this point, it's been an hour. And it obviously helps to have a big surface to work on. But it's not absolutely necessary. You can make do with whatever you have. But all right, we'll see you back here in a bit. So I've let all of our paint and our stain dry, and now we are going to glue our pieces down. You want to use wood glue, any brand, it doesn't matter. And it dries quickly, but not too fast, so you can start gluing and then make adjustments as needed. So I'm gonna start with my 2 V's of white pieces, which are probably the longest, and I'm going to run, well, hopefully, a long, wavy bead of paint, and then I'm going to do the same thing on our plywood base. And I'm just going to set that into place and repeat. Pause here and clean out my glue nozzle. We're going to run a bead of glue on our plywood, bead of glue on our wood slat, and I'm going to kind of quickly do that with all 4 pieces and then work on getting them into place. And once you have your first few pieces in place, it makes it a lot easier and quicker for the rest. So I'm gonna let these 4 dry for a couple of minutes so that they don't move very much, and then I'll glue the rest of it down. Now our piece is glued down. Everything feels pretty solid and secure. I'm gonna let this dry for a couple of hours. And then when we come back, we're gonna cut our edges off and put the finishing piece on the side, and it'll be ready to hang. Hello, we're back. We have our project completely glued down. Everything is nice and dry and attached. And now we are going to trim our edges. As you can see, I have several pieces hanging off. And on the back side, even though some of it looks fairly straight, it's not following our plywood exactly, and I want to level that off. To do this, I'm going to take 2 C-clamps and clamp each edge just so our piece doesn't move while it's on the table. If you don't have clamps, you could skip this. You could just hold it to keep it from moving, but I have a couple of clamps and I'm gonna use them. I'm leaving the board hanging off of my work table by a few inches, and I'm just going to cut each side one at a time, and I'm going to use the edge of my plywood as a guide. Any circular saw would work for this. I have this battery powered one that makes things a little easier with no cord, so I'm going to use that. I will say on circ saws, be sure you look at where your blade is. you want to make sure you're using the correct groove, and you just want to make sure that you get this edge as flush as possible. Safety goggles for this one, and hair up. You don't want your hair getting caught in anything that spins. And yeah, we're gonna cut all 4 edges the exact same way. Gotta move my seat clamp. Just a bit. Now we have one clean edge you can see from the back side. Let's see if I can flip it. And the front side. So our goal is to get all 4 sides looking like this. Okay, now we have all 4 sides of our piece cut out, looking super nice on the edges. In all honesty, you could be done here. You could just paint this edge or stain it or leave it raw. It depends on how rustic you want it to look. I think putting an edge piece just makes it look a little more finished, and you don't see the layers of plywood and then poplar. So I'm going to cut out this, it's probably 1 by 2.5 or 3. You can get any 1 by dimension from Home Depot or Lowe's. I would go with a 1 by 2 if I were buying something, but I just have scraps of this. So I am going to cut each side out, and I kind of want it to shadow box our artwork. So I'm going to place it on the wood with a ledge on both sides. More dimension to the front, but leaving a little lip so that I can hang it on the wall without having to put any hardware on it so it can catch a nail. So it'll end up being something like this on the front. And I think I'll stain it the walnut color instead of the whitewash, just personal preference. You could cut your edges straight. I know you can't see that. I've lost my assistant in the break, so it's just me now. I'm going to miter our corners at a 45 so that each piece joins on the outside and you don't see a raw edge of wood. So it's up to you what you want to do. It's a little easier to just cut it straight. The thing when cutting is I want to make sure my 45-degree goes on the long edge of the wood and not the flat edge. So I'm going to stand it up for my first cut and just get a 45 on one corner. So that I end up with this action. And then I'm going to use this on a long side because it fits. And I'm going to line up the inside corner of that 45-degree cut I just made on one edge, and then I'm going to mark the inside corner of the next cut for my other edge. If I knew that my wood canvas was completely square, I would just make 2 of the same cuts. But since I used a scrap piece, I think, well no, it looks good. So you can make 2 cuts the same length for each side and then repeat for the short side. And then we'll stain them and glue it all together. So, horrible camera angle, but I've stained all 4 side pieces with the same stain that we used, the mix of natural and walnut. Now, it might not look exactly the same color as your art piece. Remember, we used poplar slats on the art piece, and this is a pine common board. It's found in the trim section at Home Depot. You want to use common board because it's straighter, it won't be bowed and twisted, but 2 different woods will result in a slightly different color of the same stain, but it's close enough, it's in the same family. And I liberally brushed it on all 4 sides, and now, because I want to finish this project, I'm just going to use a towel and wipe off the excess. And then I'll wait a few more minutes till it's dry and won't transfer stain onto our art piece. And then I will glue all 4 sides on and possibly put a couple nails, finishing nails in where they're needed. Okay, we are ready to attach our frame pieces. I have our frame stained, dry enough. And I did go around and mark each end with a 1/2 inch mark on the inside. This is where I want our board piece to hit on the back side so that we have a lip on the front and the back. I've also propped the board up. I don't know if you can see, but I used some of our scrap poplar slats and I stacked 2. So I have a few stacks of 2 because they're 1/4 inch thick. And so I want our board to be 1/2 inch up off of our table so that I can attach our pieces, hopefully a little easier. I will say, if you happen to have a pneumatic nail gun or a brad nailer, and that would be like a staple gun or a nail gun that hooks up to compressed air with the hose, use it for this part. But I know that's not a very common tool to just have. So I'm gonna try it with just wood glue and good old hammer and nail. My nails, these are probably 2 inches long. You don't really need that. This one's 1.5. We just have a bin of random nails. Try to use finishing nails that don't have a very big head on them, so it'll sink into your wood and you won't really see it. All right, we will give it a shot. I'm gonna run a bead of glue along the edge of our piece, and I want a fair amount of coverage, but you don't want to put way too much on. Wood glue it dries yellow when it dries, and I don't want to see any of that. So I'm covering, but I'm also going back and kind of spreading it out. And then really, I'm gonna hold this there until it feels pretty good and tacked. It doesn't dry like Gorilla Glue or Super Glue. It's not really, really fast. So you might have to give it a press. And I didn't cut my board absolutely perfect, and so I'm sticking it on this side, and this side might pop out, but that's why we have nails. We're going to force it in with the nails. All right, I'll put this into time lapse. All right, so that was a little harder than I thought it would be with the edge. I will say a pneumatic nail gun really helps with that one, or just an assistant. I really regret losing my assistant for the afternoon. But it was fine. I ended up standing it up just because I didn't have someone to hold it flat, and so every time I hammered, the piece would move. But overall, not bad. I think I had one of my side cuts was just like a 1/16 of an inch short, and you can't really see it, but I do have a gap here. If you end up with that, you can always use wood filler to fill it and then lightly sand it and go over it with the same stain. It doesn't bother me so much because it is kind of a rustic art piece, and you have to look really close to see that. But I do love the shadow box effect that we get. And on the back side, we do have a nice little 1/2 inch lip to hang it up nice and secure, because it is rather heavy, so you might want to end up using 2 nails or a really good picture hanger. But that's it, guys. Only like 26 steps, and then you'll have your own. It's a fun little project, and it's a really unique piece, and it's a good way to get used to using saws and in a pretty, safe and satisfying way. Also, I've done this a couple of times with tables. If you were making a tabletop, you would do the same thing, just make sure your edge is flush with your top. And I would have given it a better sanding, but then you just clear coat it with some water-based polyurethane, and you have a really beautiful table. And I think this is a really great piece of art. So I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know if you have any questions.